Hello and welcome to Geekatplay tutorials. This is going to be one of our more extensive tutorials. We're going to be covering a lot of information here. First we'll look at the terrain functions a little bit more and the altitude functions and see what they can do for us. Also we'll look at material layers, and this is something that was introduced in Vue 6, which makes it worth exploring a little more. After, we'll take an in-depth look at the ecosystem and how layers affect it. As our project, we'll be creating a very interesting plateau type terrain with multiple layers and plants and a city. Okay, so we'll begin here with our regular terrain. And this is our standard terrain, so we'll go ahead and right click edit object, and you can see here that standard terrain to work with, and it's nothing really special. What we need right now, we've done this before in a tutorial, is we're going to go into these options and we're going to take a closer look at it than we did before. So now here we have random noise. What's nice about this is a seed for random generation. If you enter a number in here, it will create a different looking random terrain. The seed gives us a little control. So for example, if we take this one and change it to maybe 1111, but then we'll go ahead and we paste back the number before, 9941, you'll notice it looks the same as before. In fact, it's exactly the same. So there are a lot of these numbers here, each creating a unique terrain. You'll see the horizon profile they generate. And if you like one, go ahead and write it down, and then you'll be able to use it again later when you're creating something. The noise distribution, the short explanation is that it describes how big the range of up and down pixels can go in relation to the terrain. But what's really interesting here, and what gives us some direct control, is altitude distribution. We'll right click on it and then edit the filter. We've looked at this before. Sometimes it's hard to see what this line is. It isn't really the horizon profile, but it does help you think of this as the edge of your terrain, and this is like the middle of your terrain. Now this is not exactly the middle of your terrain, it's the highest point, but it does kind of help for you to think, okay, here is a constant slope going steadily from the bottom to the top. Now if I want to add a new key point here, and maybe make the slope very shallow at first and then go straight up. If you create it this way, what's happening is that you have this low slight slope here at this point, and then it's like a clip, and then just the regular terrain. Actually, looking at this, you can create something like the ice shelves off Antarctica. That would be kind of cool. We might do a tutorial about that if someone wants it. Okay, let's go back to options and edit the filter again. For this tutorial, what we want to do is create a small, shallow area, and then the slope here is a little bit steeper. And let's go horizontal right here. And let's add one more point, maybe right here, and put this down like this. So we have 3 steps up. And here, this is like the prairie, a little bit this way. Okay. So this is what we have. Something that you might use here in a western. And also, you see, this could be a way to bring in human alteration, like a road or a cliff city or a castle. And it's kind of an interesting look. Let's click OK, and here's our terrain. And right now, let's go to the material editor right here by double clicking. And what we have here in Vue 6, layers were introduced. You see this button right here that says Add Layer. So it means you can add multiple layers to one. And this works in some ways like Photoshop. You have one layer going on top of another and on top of another, but instead Photoshop uses 2D. Here we actually have 3D. So let's create an additional layer. And as an additional layer, let's create maybe something. Let's make it sandstone. Also, you notice that it's kind of mixing because our default layer is kind of overlook. So you can go there and kind of change this default layer to maybe brown rocks, I think. And also something that's interesting is that you have some limitation to what you can add to the layer. So let's add one more layer. And for example, we'll take, I think it's the Arizona one. And you notice that because it's a mixed material that it cannot accept it. So you can combine, but you have some limitations on what type of materials you can add to the layers. So we'll select brown rocks again. Let's add another layer and let's make it paths in the sand. And let's add maybe a couple more. And it doesn't really matter, just a couple of anything else. So we have right here, if you notice, we have multiple layers. So this is a tutorial for View 6, but if we were working in View 5, what we did before, if you remember, from material distribution to see how they laid out properly, we'd probably go inside and load predefined solid colors so we can easily see how they're arranged. But with View 6, we don't need to do that. Look right here on the right, you see you have a highlighter, and if you click on this, it assigns the colors to this. If you don't like the colors, you can go over, right click on them with your mouse and select the color that you think is more suitable for you. So let's select the white for this one, blue, yellow, green, and red, and maybe this color here. Okay, so we've changed these colors. If you preview in the window, it's easy to see how it's all mixed right now. This is our base layer. And if you look down here, you have our standard tabs here. Now if you pick the one layer above, you have a new tab pop up called Environment. And there are some new options in the Environment tab. You have altitude range. This is our 3D positioning for this layer. So -1 is the lowest and 1 is the top. Also we have fuzziness top and bottom. This is another way, if you remember, with material mix when we had them overlayering to merge them with each other. And this is how much they will integrate with the other layers. Slope range is the way you want them to overlap. -1 is under and 1.0 is over. So if you want to do vertical layers, you actually need to go more towards 0. And this one, so this will have a vertical covering for this. So you see here that it's changing some colors. This preferred orientation and orientation tightness, they're kind of the same as fuzziness. It shows how the materials display. But for now, let's concentrate on altitude range. Let's start by setting this one here to maybe minus 0.12, and we'll set this one this way. Well, this way, and what I'm doing right now is I'm just very roughly setting them. The reason why is because I want to show you this. And you see how it's looking now. The layers are starting to separate here. You can also see where they're mixing together. And if you imagine using this with the ecosystem, this can be an excellent tool. So by separating, you can mix more and more materials together in specific areas based on the altitude. And if you preview here, this is what we have now. Let's take our purple and increase it up to maybe this edge right here. Right here up to it. So we'll go back to here. Actually, it's blue that we're working with, and we'll just increase the altitude range a little bit higher. Okay, I think we're actually mixing with the other color, so let's move this color away right here. Okay, the best way, of course, to preview is a quick render on the screen. So we can see now how it's going up and mixing. Let's right now take our camera and move it a little bit above so we can kind of view this from a higher point. Okay, let's go back to the terrain. What I want to do is make this go right here, right up to the edge. Now we take our next color, and one thing if you notice here is at 0.05, so we can copy this, paste it right here. And one thing that I want to do is actually to do something on the edge right here, just add an additional layer right here. So I'll go to 0.01 and 0.0 and maybe like 0.06. So if you look right here now, you can kind of see it's appearing right here on the edge. Maybe if we need it a little bit higher, we can go up to. So let's try to put it maybe at 0.10, maybe. That's very close. 2 more. So 0.12. Okay, I'm happy with that now, and that edge is just how I like it. So the next color, we'll take it, and again we have right here, this is 0.12, so we put 12 right here, and this is a little bit down here. And one other thing, if you want to do flat, you can do the 0.12, or maybe you can do slightly cover, just a little bit over. So it's not totally flat. You still need to play around with these settings a little bit and see how they look. Very close. Okay, and there you go. And here we have our layers. The flat layer, this one. And why this is nice is because you can say, hey, I want the grass here, I want trees, I want bushes on the sides. Okay. And now we have 0.18 here, and we'll go right there. 0.18. We have it here at 0.79 maybe, and this will be on the top. Let's preview now. So that is how we preset our layer. And now if we go back and turn off the markers, we can now see what we preset, how we've done it. So we have the sand stuff on the top right here. We have the rocks and some other rocks here. And if you remember those, Arizona. So let's of course put more sand right on the top. And this is actually easy to do. We need to go on that top one, and we'll just set it paths in the sand. Actually, when we go this one on the top, look at this. I can change here. We actually need it back to brown rock. And this one's sandstone, we'll just change that. Okay, so this is what we have. You notice how we change the layers depending on where we want them to reside here. And now we're going to start to add in the ecosystem. So let's take another look at what we have. So we saw now how the layers interact, how they can overlay, and how you can change materials to apply different type of materials to the layers, and in the same material settings. And the best part about this, if we apply paired materials, so you can save it if you like the layout, and you can use this over and over in other places. So here we're looking at our terrain, at the different layers, and they're affecting each other like in Photoshop, like they do in Photoshop layers. Only here you can specify where they appear by altitude. And also working with the slope is interesting. So if you want specific materials to apply only on the slope, you can select here, and these materials will only go on the slope even as it mixes with the other materials. For instance, here I don't like how the sand is going, so I'll just go on the bottom and say, hey, I want fuzziness, and you can see how it's now fuzzy on top. And I go to the next one, say I want it fuzzy on the bottom and fuzzy on the top, and that is already kind of smoothing them out. And we'll do the same with this one. We'll make the fuzziness increase on both of them, and it kind of blends the layers together. Of course, you can change the materials easily if you want, but one thing you want to be aware, if you change the materials, sometimes, like, let's look right here, and we have 0.05. So if I go right here, and I say, you know what, I want to change this material to something else. Okay, let's go right here, and let's change it to this one. You find sometimes an incompatibility with alpha, which is okay, but what happens is that the environmental is reset as well. So sometimes you'll be creating something, you'll replace a material, and you say, whoa, hey, what's going on? They're all back to the default. That is what happened. We just applied that material here, and there, this is what we have. So it's a nice looking terrain here. We're liking it so far. So now let's bring the ecosystem into this. The ecosystem adds many more effects and influences between the layers. And to create this is very easy. We just select one of them, and we click right here, ecosystem, and it will add another layer. And one of the beauties of this, if you look, it actually brings in those altitude attributes, so you don't need to copy paste them. It remembers everything, and if you need to do it again, you just go click and you can create again one more right here. So now you have two of them. And let's select the bottom one over here, and this is kind of easy to overview. Let's go to objects, and let's create, I just pre-created a simple sphere saved as an object, and now let's populate it. And if you go over here, it has tons of spheres, and it's about where that layer is. Sometimes it helps for me to replace the real object I would use, like trees, with something simple to see how they will distribute. It's easy to see how the density works with overlapping. Maybe I don't want them to be so high, I want them to be down. So I go to environment, and let's make it on the slope. It is more flat because I don't want them to be right up here around the top. So when I preset this, it actually moves them down, and they aren't right on these higher areas. And that is how slope constraint can help us. And this is one that we kind of know how to use, color at low densities. So we can go and say, you know, well, let's use blue here. And let's change this up a little. And let's see. And let's see here. And the colors have changed a little bit. But this one is not that affected. But the colors will change more if you're using trees or some other vegetation. And it's the same like variable colors. You can do exactly the same, only it will be applied by functions. Here, this is kind of interesting. It's right here is kind of interesting to understand sometimes. It might look very difficult, but really it's easy. So let's now load a map. You know, let's go to something simple. Let's use this one. Okay, so if you look at the filter, and let's edit this, right click edit. This is kind of interesting. These are your colors. And the blue one will go on the bottom. Red is on the top. So you have green, yellow, red, so they're going up the diagonal. And this is default. And here is your black and white. Black is deeper and white is the top. So right here is your black and this is your white. So if we're going right here, we click new and add a new key point and say I want it from black to maybe like medium gray. This one. I want here to be everything to be blue. And I also want red here up around the top, across here, and here's the blue. So we have only this small area of gray, which will represent the other colors. So we click OK, let's populate, and we have a lot of blues here, and a lot of some reds, and just a few colors in between them. So this is how that filter will work, instead of having a linear distribution. And again, how you can use this, sometimes maybe you want to create yellow and green maybe, but you say you want a little bit less of this color between. I want to concentrate more on this. Or you say I want just a little bit of the yellow and the majority in the green. So you can change it this way. Click OK, populate, and here you see the majority is green here. And there's just a few yellows in that yellow tone. And the scaling works in a similar way. But so now let's look at something else. This is our one layer, and this is our second, which goes about this. Let's add here an object. Let's put in another sphere. Only instead, let's decrease the scaling on this. And let's go to the color, and we'll also change the color to something red so we can easily see it. Normally, when you populate, this is what happens. They go all over the place. But another thing that can happen is that these layers interact with each other. So it's not just altitude, but they can also interact with the objects that are located near to them. For example, right here is distribution. You see it's kind of grayed out, but if you go one layer above, you notice that the underlying materials are being shown. And the ecosystem and also your distribution is enabled here. And affinity with the layer, what this does is to make this new object you just created interact with those objects in the ecosystem below. Let's just show, for example, if we can increase this up. Let's click populate and preview. What's happening is that, like a magnet, these objects were attracted to the objects in the layer above. So these layers are interacting. And this is very useful when you're putting in something like trees and you want like grass right under the trees, because the trees are providing shade, and so the grass is greener there. So you can actually build this way simple objects so you can easily preview how they will be located. And a second object is repulsion from the layer. What this actually does is to push them away, so they have kind of like a neutral zone and they can't come close. So maybe the shade is too much and no grass grows under the tree here. So we'll do it that way. But now let's set this repulsion now to 0. Okay, populate this one. Also, the same way the color will be affected if you have low density and other things. Now that we've done this, let's remove this one. And let's remove the other one. And we'll go to the first layer, and instead let's add an object, and let's add a cylinder. So we can show you something else here. So let's populate it. So right now, if you look at the cylinder, this is like a normal population. But one thing I want to show you, because when you start to work with layers, what's happening when they're going on the surface. Okay, let's go increase this way. You notice some of them are not going on the vertical. Some of them are tipped a little bit, have some angles, and this is because you have right here right here you have the direction from the surface, and this is what defines this. If you go to vertical all the way, they will go absolutely vertical from the ground, and if you go all the way perpendicular, you see that some objects will stick out sideways here, right from the surface. And they're going directly from the surface that they're assigned to. And actually, this is very useful, because what is happening is if you have trees and they're going from the slope, trees still go up mostly in the slope. But if it is moss, or maybe you want to put a rock, you want them to go perpendicular. Before, what is happening is that if you go right here and you add maybe rocks, you add maybe a tree, and you add let's look some grass. Without layers, what happened is that you went right there and you kind of needed to sacrifice something and find some compromise. But now you can just say, I want only trees on this layer, and I want them to go vertically. And there you go. And I have another layer, and now I will add to this layer. Okay, and instead on this layer, I want them to be perpendicular. So you're going there, you populate. Okay. And you can preview here. In some cases, with the layers now, it is much easier to create something. And this is how the ecosystem interacts. And again, you can mix with them, you can put them on different layers. And like I said before, if you're going right there and you create an ecosystem on this, and the ecosystem takes its cue from the environment below. So for example, on this flat area, if you want to create something. But now, let's work here now. And remember, each square is 10 meters by 10 meters. So our terrain is really very small. Let's increase its size. Okay, so we'll make this a little bit bigger. And let's move our camera also up so it can overview it. Let's go to the terrain right now. And let's right now go and to the grass field, and let's remove this one. And we'll just add more plants. And fall is coming, so let's bring in some fall colors. Green, red, yellow, maybe we'll increase the density a little bit here. And we're just getting it how we want. Okay, let's go one layer above, and if you remember, if you set here, it affects what you do. Actually, you know, let's add some different kinds of plants. Just for fun, let's create them a little bit smaller. Increase the density. I'm just creating this density so we have it a little bit more interesting looking around. And of course you see how the colors are? And the reason for that is because we still have those colors set from previously. So we go to colors right here, reset this one right here, and here's what happened. So of course we disable this one and we reset. And if we populate right now, we'll have the correct colors. If you notice, we have just a lot of these fall trees going around on the ground. Now, you know what? Probably we want to populate it more. Let's go right here. And we'll just change this right here. And this is set how we want. No, we don't want it to go on the slope. And we're just checking everything to see that we have it how we want. And this is what will come up with a whole forest of trees. Really highly populated, really dense. And you know, take some time with it here. Play around with it. So let's go now above, and this is actually the brown rocks, if you remember. We're on this side, and if you create echo, let's add some rocks and maybe bring in some plants, some green plants. And what's happening, you can see how the trees are going around just this area. Just right here on the edge. And again, this is a nice thing to do with this very thin layer that we created for. Just apply the ecosystem over that. And also you can take a road-like texture, and apply it to the same kind of layer. And another thing, let's go right now to this one. And that's in an object. Let's just add a building here. Just maybe we'll add more buildings. Here in density, we don't want it to overlap. So what do you have with our echo population. We've created like this city right here with the plants that it's overlooking, and we can add plants on the top to make it interesting. And this is our top, and we'll add one more ecosystem right here. And how you see these qualities are all the same. Let's add plants. And you know what? Let's add this tree. And I want a lot of them here, so I want the full population there. Let's go OK. Move the camera just a little so we can see the top. Okay. And here we have our small city on the mountains with all these interesting colored trees going. Now, of course, you know, the resolution is so nice on this, and you notice how fast it's going. Even if you zoom very, very close, you can still achieve a great looking result. So we go in here like this. Get it just right there. So in that case, if you need to build some interesting scenery and you want to zoom in and out, like in a game or something, with these materials you can preset them so they're very nice looking, and you can be very close up or very far away without worrying. Let's right now just change our ground, and we'll set the scale here. And we'll set it this way. So now let's go to atmosphere. Let's change it to something heavy summer. Will be good, I think. Well, I think the clouds are a little bit too low. So I'll go to the clouds, and we'll increase the altitude with them. So we just put the clouds a little bit above us. And you always can create your own clouds and change them how you want. Put them a little below, move them around. Make them bigger. Okay, and let's see what we have. So here in our final picture, you can see these nice trees are interspersed with the other ones as a peaceful scene with some trees on top and a city right here going on the edge, some houses. And to accomplish this, we used the functions to build our terrain, to make these nice plateaus with it. And we did that with functions, and we used materials layers to refine our look, and we used the ecosystem in those layers, taking advantage of the interaction between layers so we could control better where these trees and buildings went. And thank you for watching this tutorial from Geekatplay Studio. If you have any questions or you're looking for more resources, please visit us at www.geekatplay.com or vututorials.com.